Guess who got brands talking? brandlive.co.za.
Good morning, everyone. You have tuned into the WITEE Chatterbotts show, Women in Tech Empowering Everyone. And we are coming live from our studio at 27 Boxes in the Bohemian city of Melville. I'm Camen, your host. I have to emphasize, we believe that knowledge is your superpower. And our aim of the show is to empower our listeners with masterclasses and interviews on the latest trends in digital technology, innovation, entrepreneurship, but also to give you a perspective on socio-economic developments to propel your business forward. Last week, for those of you who didn't listen in, by the way, you have to listen to last week's show. If you didn't, it was super interesting. We had the renowned Paul Berney, founder of The Connected Marketer, as my guest, or as my co-host, and Kirsten Dugmore, founder of Suga Spice, as the guest, and she shared some very interesting disciplines on behavioral economics. Now, to our audience, you are getting an extra treat today because we have both Paul and Kirsty back in the studio. So welcome, Paul.
Good morning from the cold and wet England.
Boring.
Sorry.
No, I'm just jesting with you. I mean, at least it's not snowing, so that's a good start. You're in spring now, right?
Step up. Sort of. It's supposedly. The calendar says it's spring. The weather does not.
Thought as much. Kirsty, good morning.
Morning, Camen. Morning, Paul.
Wonderful.
Good morning.
Morning to all the listeners.
Yes, listeners, good morning. Sorry if I didn't greet you. Behavioral economics tries to solve a problem which has plagued economics from the start. Like, people consistently do things that don't make sense, and we make decisions in non-linear ways, which has influenced many external factors for us as marketers. And this is why we're going to chat about behavioral economics and how that can give your customer, and how you can use that to give your customers better experiences. So I'm going to hand you over to Paul, and Paul's going to open up for us this morning, and let's get rocking.
Thanks, Carmen. So, Kirsty, I learned a ton from you last week, and just to make sure that I learned it correctly, the three disciplines that you've managed to twine together to help brands are observed consumer behavior, behavioral economics, and cognitive neuroscience. So those were all about understanding the way in which people behave, the way in which we make decisions, the technical observation of those behavior, understanding our biases, and you talked to us about system 1 and system 2 behavior. And that gave us a great grounding in understanding consumer behavior. What I'd love to ask you some questions about today is, how do we then apply that understanding of consumer behavior to marketing planning and marketing thinking? What's the starting point with brands when you've persuaded them of a need to understand people in a deeper way?
Okay, thanks, Paul. And you're an exceptional student because you're absolutely spot on about what we discussed last week. All right, the key takeout, or the big switch, I think, for marketers in terms of applying all these understandings into consumer behaviors and how consumers are making decisions, is that marketers or brand managers need to make sure that their brands are easily thought of when it matters. So when somebody comes into the market for a product or a category of products, how is that brand coming to mind easily at that point of time? Because that's when the consumer is going to purchase the product or the service. The traditional view was to try and build a media marketing brand strategy that had consumers up at night thinking about your brand, considering your brand, wanting to have a relationship with brands. That is not the case. It's not the real world of how people are buying or interacting with brands. So I think as a starting point for marketers, does your strategy and your brand and all your communication and your creative work towards being able to be thought of when consumers come into the market to buy? The second, I think, really critical element is that as marketers, we cannot predict consumer behavior. Andrew Ehrenberg has a very famous quote where he says, it depends on the need or the mood of the moment as to why people come into the market for certain services or products. And you as a marketer cannot predict that or understand it. It's completely random. So your media strategy and your marketing strategy needs to align that you are in the market as consistently as possible. So when those different consumers come into the market at their random times, at different times, you are talking to them and that they can then refresh your memory links and be thought of when they're coming to the market for your product. Are you there when they're coming to the market? So if I have a need because my coffee, we spoke about coffee last week, my coffee jar is empty this week and I'm going into the market, if you have made a touch or had a touch point with me within the last couple of days, there's a good chance that your brand will come to market and you then stand a chance of being part of the consideration set of brands I might put into my trolley this week. Is that making sense?
So it does make sense. Yeah. So two parts to it. One is what you talked about last week is this idea of having brand salience, which is make sure that we are in the consideration set when consumers. And the second thing about depends upon the needs at different points. And the word you didn't use was journey, but I'd like to get to talk about that.
Sure.
Camen and I are big believers in customer journey mapping as an essential skill for marketers in the 21st century. I think my understanding or my belief is that there's a huge challenge for marketers in that there is no such thing as a linear journey. And we'd like to think there's a journey between, from awareness to advocacy, but there isn't. And what you've just hinted at there is that people behave in slightly different ways at different points in the journey. Can you share with us your view on how we would apply thinking about customer behavior at different points in a journey?
Yes, certainly. In terms of the journey, and I think we've come a long way, the awareness triangle that most marketers are familiar with, where it's the inverted triangle that goes to familiar, awareness, familiarity, consideration, then you purchase and loyalty. And that was certainly very linear. We now know, and it's common knowledge, that is certainly not the case. We cannot predict or guide consumers through a decision journey. So we have come a long way, and we now have a circular process. McKinsey obviously have put together a circular consumer customer journey mapping system, which is far improved from the original one. The problem with trying to understand the customer journey at every point is that a lot of our customer decision making or our decisions as humans or customers is made at a non-conscious level, or it's a system one decision. So we are making decisions that are short-circuited in our mind. So the understanding that we try and plan marketing for a consumer that goes into initial consideration, then they do an active evaluation, and it goes so on, and then it's a moment of purchase, post-purchase. This is a highly involved sort of system two approach to tackling marketing. And certainly it doesn't reflect well with real life decision making. A lot of the time we are making snap decisions using shortcuts, and at a huge amount of the time it's not even at a conscious level that we're making these purchasing decisions. So in terms of the journey, the fact that it is linear and not linear, that it is a process and you can tap in at any point in terms of your customer decision journey, I think that's great. But you need to make sure as a marketer in your journey that you are touching on all points of where your marketers are. So whether they're going to make a snap decision, if they are considering a purchase, if they're going to now fly, if they want to fly to the coast for a holiday, they need to book an aeroplane ticket. Wherever they are, whether they're considering or they're going to evaluate and compare prices, or they're just going to go out of habit and book on the airline that they always do, make sure that you as a marketer are touching your marketers on all these points. So absolutely be aware of all the points and the customer journey, but make sure your marketing efforts are touching on all those points in your customer journey, because you can't predict consumer behavior. not even the actual people making the decision normally can predict their decision.
If I might just add there, something that's very interesting with what you said. Obviously, it's very important to remove barriers and be of service to the customers in these short decisions, but also to gamify the drudgery and, take these tasks and make them simpler for the customer. I just want to ask you one question. Sorry, Paul, I'm sure that you've had some questions, but I just want to quickly understand it for our audience. When you say that we can't predict customers' behavior, but what about predictive analysis? And when you use data science and you use data to try and do predictive analysis, is there some truth to that?
Yes, certainly. Data is hugely important and hugely helpful, but that's aggregated consumer behavior. So they will tell you X amount of people will come onto the airline site to search, X amount will convert, some will only search, some will come back. Absolutely, but that's aggregated actual consumer behavior, and you need to apply that to your marketing strategy. So you're not... What I'm trying to steer away from is marketers marketing to an individual and sort of honing in on a very tight, small group of people and trying to guide them through the process. That's not constructive from a marketing perspective. So yes, people are going to come onto your site. Yes, they are going to purchase. But how are your marketing efforts making sure as many of those people that come into the market are behaving in that way and actioning on your website
So I think a lot of marketers listening, and I put myself in this category, Kirsty, would find that the last thing you've just said there quite difficult to kind of square away with the thought that actually lots of us have a strong belief that more personalized marketing, more relevant marketing is going to be more successful. And actually, the days of mass marketing are gone or at least receding. So we're kind of at odds with each other on here. Do you not believe in using all of the techniques that you've talked about, behavioral economics, what have you, to help build personas to at least group people together by behavior rather than using segmentation, or are you suggesting that really it's mass marketing is the only thing that really works?
No, so I'm not suggesting that mass marketing is the only way that works. I do certainly believe that personalized marketing has got its place. I just caution against excluding mass marketing because it plays an incredibly big role in terms of building brands and reaching those customers that are coming into the market at different times and different stages for your brand, your product, or your service that you offer. And certainly you can put the personalized marketing into play alongside your mass marketing. Your mass marketing is the tool that's going to give you more customers that are going to want to use you more often. And we know, obviously, as marketers, we have guys that are light users of brands, or your non-users. They're category buyers, but they don't use your brands. Then you've got your light buyers that use you very occasionally. Then you've got your medium buyers, and then you've got your heavier buyers. And what certainly Ehrenberg Bass says, and a lot of the very well-respected media houses are saying, is that, yes, you will have a group of people that are committed and are loyal to you and want the personal marketing. But certainly a lot of your profit and your growth is coming from people that don't really engage with you all that much or don't know you all that well. And those are your light buyers. And they actually become incredibly important for your bottom line and your profits. And it's an economy of scales thing. There's just a lot more of them. So certainly there is space and to engage with your consumers, but please don't exclude your mass marketing because it plays a really, really important role.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that. We're just quickly going for an ad break, and then we are going to continue on the customer user journey. Thank you so much, guys.
brandlive.co.za.
Good morning, I'm Paul Berney, founder of The Connected Marketer from the UK. You are listening in to the WITEE Chatterbotts Show. This is a show not to be missed. Join the conversation on #WITEE, that's WITEE, and get the podcast on brandlive.co.za.
attention, please.
The WITEE Chatterbots join myself, Camen Murray, and my double trouble, Jessica McIndoe, with our big personalities, and we will present you with an insightful yet fun show.
We will feature interviews with industry heavyweights and unpack everything from new technologies, marketing trends, and case studies to empower you to be ahead of the curve.
Brand Live.
Join us on this exciting journey every Tuesday morning at 10 o'clock and start a conversation on hashtag WITEE Show.
Hashtag WITEE Show.
Thank you.
You're listening to brandlive.co.za.
Everyone, for you who have just tuned in, you're on the WITEE Chatterbotts show, and I am here with our guest, Kirsten Dugmore, and then also with our co-host all the way from the UK, Mr. Paul Berney. Thank you very much for joining in, and we are unpacking behavioral economics and how that impacts the customer user journey. So I want to kickstart based on everything that we've chatted with a question. They say that the left brain thinks linear, methodical, and it thinks in numbers, it analyzes the future and the past, and that's where your ego lies, is in your left brain. But then on your right brain is where you're free and you think in colors, emotional, and very carefree and spontaneous. Now, we all know that we use both sides of our brain, so how does it all work together to impact the customer experience or to create that sensorial experience and serve the customer's needs?
Okay, so Camen, I don't sort of talk in the left brain, right brain way. The better way and the more constructive way, I think, to look at this, certainly from a marketer and branding perspective, is to understand what a brand is in a consumer's mind and what it means to have a strong brand. And we touched on it in terms of mental and physical availability last week. And I certainly should have touched on it earlier in Paul's question, the importance of having a mentally available brand. And what it means when a brand is mentally available is that it comes to mind when you're in the shopping environment to purchase a brand or service. But how you build this mental availability is not a left brain, right brain thing at all. It's a network of brand associations. So when you have a brand that is strong, let's talk about Coke, for instance, as an example. You have this Coke brand in your mind, and you've got a whole array of rich associative networks or brand associations in your mind. You've from usage, you have it at bras with friends. The advertising resonates with you. You stayed with somebody at varsity who had a glass of it every day. And in my mind, that's my neural association of this brand. I've got this really rich association in my mind. And the richer your brand network or your brand associations are, and the fresher those links into advertising and marketing are in your mind, the better the chances are that brand will come into to mind in that consumer's buying situation. It also makes you as a consumer feel more comfortable with the brand. You feel like you know it, it's familiar, because you've got all these associations. You see the logo, you understand the color of the brand, and all of those things form a part of your rich neural network of brand associations in your mind. So from a marketing perspective, it's not about talking to the left brain or the right brain. It's about making contact points. Some of them you cannot control, experience, word of mouth, but some of them, your advertising messages, your logo, your assets you use, you absolutely can control. And are you doing everything as a marketer to build and refresh those associations in the consumer's mind? That's one thing. In terms of serving the consumer, as you asked the question, or producing content or creative or advertising that helps build these associative networks. A lot of the research is saying that emotional messaging and making sure that your messages are getting an emotional reaction from a consumer that is engaging with your message on whatever platform is a much more effective way to enrich those networks and make sure that they are refreshed and that you're building those rich networks. I just want to caution, I'm not saying that we want consumers to fall in love or be emotionally engaged with brands. I am saying that emotional messaging helps to build rich brand networks and helps let's go back to last week. System 1 is emotional. If you're building emotional communication, you're working with System 1. When you're in a buying situation and you're trying to make a quick decision, those brands will come to mind because you've worked all your communication, your strategy, and your creative back to understanding how consumers are making decisions.
Awesome. Just before Paul asks his next question, I just want to add to what you've just said. One of the things like Chicken Lick, and Paul, I actually think I shared that ad with you. Now, I want to tell you the story behind it. So I've never had Chicken Lick in my life before because I thought it's for a certain market. But when I saw that ad, and I'm only human after all, and this guy that gets his robots and he goes to Chicken Lick all the time, and all this humor happening, I just thought it was brilliant. And the other day I tasted Chicken Licken for the first time is because they made an emotional connection with me, because I promise you I would never under normal circumstances go and have Chicken Licken. And I think that is exactly to your point. It's like stimulating both sides and making those emotional connections, whether it's in a fun way, emotional way, or just in a human to human way.
So yeah, let me unpack your experience from a theory perspective. What happened is you would have first come into the market for takeaway food. So your tummy was obviously rumbling. You thought,
Yes.
I am in the market.
Don't tell everybody.
I am hungry. I want to eat something. And you had seen a bit of communication that had resonated with you. You had responded. And what happened? That brand came to mind. And then you went through and you purchased Chicken Licken. So yeah, a good piece of advertising, obviously, that resonated with you. And when you were primed to get some fast food.
Let me ask you a question though, Camen.
Yeah.
How far away from you were from the nearest Chicken Licken were you?
It was en route to my next meeting.
Amen.
And
Thanks,
they had a drive-through, and the drive-through
And
made the
How
difference.
did you know it was there?
Well, I could see like a kilometer ahead that they had a sign that the Chicken Licken is going to be there. I think it was in Randburg. And I was driving on my way to a meeting, and I saw all the restaurants. So I expected to see Chicken Licken, McDonald's. And as I was driving, I'm not in the mood for McDonald's. I'm not in the mood. And then I saw Chicken Licken, and they had a drive-through. And I was like, okay, this is convenient for me. Let me get in there and go through drive-through. Then I can eat in the car because I had little time.
If they didn't have the drive-through, would you have stopped?
No.
Right.
Good point.
So,
No, I wouldn't have.
Actually, mental availability is one
One
thing,
half.
but actually reorientating their marketing to be about serving your needs and convenience was just as important to you.
Yes.
Yeah, the physical availability.
Physical availability, but also physical availability doesn't work if you haven't also got the convenience bit. Physical availability is I've got a building. It's on the same road as all the rest of them. No drive-through, no stop. So the drive-through part, the focusing on convenience and simplifying things for you, taking the friction out of the journey, we might say as marketers, was just as important as everything else. I think that Kirsty's mentioned. Yes, it's stuck in your head, but you'd have driven past if you couldn't do it by the product simply.
I absolutely love that term, taking the friction out of the journey. I think that's what it's all about. Absolutely. We have lives as humans, and we've got a lot going on. So certainly making a brand decision as easy as possible certainly puts a brand in good stead.
Yeah, and so I think that you've shared a ton of stuff today, Kirsty. That I think if we had more time, that it would be great to unpack further and ask you questions over. And you know that I don't necessarily agree with all the points you made, but I think one of the important things for marketers is that the point you've made is that there's no one simple answer for every brand and every marketer. That there needs to be a mixture of both mass marketing and targeted marketing, but we both start from the same place, which you must understand the needs of your consumer. That comes before everything else. Before you can decide on anything else, what people want, what they need, has got to be the starting point of marketing.
Absolutely, and understanding how they behave and what's driving their decision process. Also incredibly important. And I think we don't have enough time today, and you and I could debate for hours, I think, Paul, but there are a couple of really key fundamentals when writing a marketing strategy or putting a media plan together. And certainly we have touched on some of those key points today.
Awesome.
So if we have time for one very last question, can you? Right at the start, you made a point about people making decisions instinctively. Can you give me an example of just one instinctive decision thing that we make when we're buying products or a type of product that's bought instinctively without people thinking?
So I think the vast majority of products are bought instinctively or on your system one or out of habit or intuitively, because we don't, as marketers, we like to think our consumers are debating and thinking about our brands, but we don't think about it too much at all. So the easier brands make it for consumers, and the richer those neural networks and the more top of mind those brands are, the easier and smoother and frictionless the decisions come and that hand goes out onto the shelf. And certainly most brand decisions or most product service decisions are made on your system one using shortcuts and making the snap decisions. Not too many decisions are deliberated at length at all across categories.
Awesome.
Fantastic.
Thank you so much, Paul. Are you going to do the quiz for us this week?
I thought, listening into your quiz last week, I thought it must be time for someone to ask you the questions, Carmen.
I love your work, Paul.
Oh, no, come on, Paul.
If you're okay with it, I've written my own questions, so never mind yours. I'm going to ask my questions. You and Kirsty should do these together. They are either or answers. You cannot give me any other answer other than the two options I'm giving you. Is that clear?
I'm very unprepared for this.
One word.
Welcome
One
to
word.
my world.
Yeah.
Hashtag payback. Thank you, Paul.
Okay. Tinker.
Exactly.
Carmen, do you go first?
Okay, Paul, go for it.
No, you'll go together.
Are we going to go together? Oh.
Okay.
Shout your answers out. Shout your answers out.
Okay.
Okay,
You
we're ready.
Go.
Red or white?
Red.
Wine.
Huh?
Carmen?
One. Red.
Red or white wine?
Merlot.
Oh, one. Red.
No, only one word, Carmen. Don't break the rules.
Cabernet
Seaside or
Sauvignon is a wine. Okay. No, I'm joking.
Seaside or mountain holiday?
Mountain.
Seaside.
Happy and healthy or happy and wealthy?
Happy and healthy.
Both.
Both is a word.
Holiday in SA or holiday far away?
Far away.
Far away.
Parachute or scuba dive?
Scuba dive.
Parachute.
Braai or restaurant?
Bry.
Public speaking or cold call?
Public speaking.
Startup or corporate?
Startup.
Startup.
Chiefs or pirates?
Chiefs.
Pirates.
Boo.
Cricket or rugby?
Rugby.
Acquisition or retention?
Acquisition.
Oh dear. Read the book or see the movie?
Read
Read the book.
Oh,
Left brain or right brain?
right brain.
We are right.
Emotional brain.
System 1 or system 2?
System one, baby.
And your time is up.
Thanks,
That
Paul.
was awesome. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. And I just want to, first of all, say, Kirsty, thank you so much for spending the time with us. Paul, thank you so much for all the effort that you have done in supporting this journey and these episodes. Then just lastly, if anybody wants to get hold of you, Kirsty, how can they get hold of you?
Yeah, certainly. You can. My email address is Kirsty, Kirsty, at Suga, SUGASPICE.co.za. So that's Kirsty, Kirsty, at Suga, SUGASPICE.co.za. And just from my side, Carmen, Paul, thanks so much for having me. It's been
It was wonderful, but we're going to have you back very soon. Okay, guys. Thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, Paul.
That was so much fun.
brandlive.co.za.
In your face, all over the place. We're online 24/7. 24/7. You're listening to the hottest internet station.
Brand Live.
No doubt.